So let's so again, like with USF, I think this is a team that I think clearly has high expectations of itself and knows and has a few guys that know how to get to an NCAA tournament, what it takes to get to an NCAA tournament. A lot of new pieces on this team. I think that's going to be a huge thing early on is how they integrate into the system. How does Marcus Williams integrate? How do some of the others actually kind of like mix in? How does Tyrell Roberts kind of fit into this puzzle? You have guys like Julian Rishwain and Josh Coonan who played really key roles off the bench last year, who are going to have to carry a larger load this year. I think many would probably point to Julian Rishwain as someone who's is primed to maybe have a breakout season this year. And I'm one right now that I do have USF finishing third in the conference. I think they're the third best team right now, behind Gonzaga and St. Mary's. I think the continuity on the coaching staff is a huge component to that. I think the continuity with guys like Shabazz and Rishwain and Coonan is also a key component. So is there a chance? Yes. Like I think there's all like when you have enough of the pieces coming back and you have a coaching staff that is largely still there, I think there's room to kind of see the path to an NCAA tournament for USF. Right now, I think they're probably on the outside looking in, but this team is clearly set up confidence-wise to actually have that as the target and the goal for this season. All right, so let's go into this conference schedules. We got those just a few weeks back, and we started to analyze and not analyze, but like look over the schedules and really kind of see like where are going to be the tough stretches for teams, who has maybe the toughest stretch, and which ones are going to impact what we see in Las Vegas and maybe an NCAA tournament, because I think that there's going to be at least a few stretches where like teams are going to be challenged in a significant way. And and I'm going to point, at least like I'm going to start and just point at Portland. So Portland we know is coming off of a really good season. The surprise season for anyone who was following WCC, the team that actually won 20 games a year after after years of being dreadful in this conference. And this is a team that also has high expectations of itself. Now, looking at the conference schedule, I think one of the really big challenges, they're going to get tested early and almost right away. So between that first week, starting that first week of the season, they do have LMU, but then after that, they have a 6-game stretch, excuse me, where they are going to be on the road at BYU, at St. Mary's, at Gonzaga, and then also and then hosting USF San Diego and Pepperdine. They have their 3 toughest road games right off the bat in conference play, along with 3 teams who are going to be in the mix to be in that middle of the pack, trying to stay out of that opening round matchup. There's some talk about Pepperdine and the talent that they have. So maybe this is a team that could surprise USF, as we just talked about, is going to be a team that's going to be up there. But Portland was one of the teams that beat USF last year. Maybe it came as a surprise at that moment it happened, but now it's no longer going to come. Portland's not going to sneak up on anybody this time around. And then San Diego again is also one of these teams that kind of has a lot of intrigue around it because of the transfers they've brought in, because Steve Lavin is now the new head coach. San Diego is going to be a team, especially to watch early on in the season, because I don't know if there's necessarily high expectations externally about this team, but there's definitely going to be a microscope on that team and looking to see how they do. And Portland, San Diego is going to be one of those matchups that kind of like that, where we start to see who's going to kind of like rise and fall. I feel like in the middle of the pack there. And then taking a look over the schedule some more. Again, like that stretch at the beginning of the season for Portland, I think is going to be key if they can survive and manage that. Because again, when you're on the road at BYU, at St. Mary's, at Gonzaga, you're not going to obviously you're not expecting to win all of those games. Even if you're expecting to win majority of those games, you can manage that first half of conference play. I think that they'll set themselves up well for the rest of the season. Another couple actually are probably, so I'm going to go over to St. Mary's, who it's the back half of their schedule that's going to be the challenge. I see from January 28th on, they have, let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games. So literally the back half of their schedule does not leave them much room for a breather. They'll see BYU twice, USF, Gonzaga twice, Portland, San Diego, and then you do drop in LMU and Pacific. You have what have been the perennial top three team, the other top two of the three teams, including St. Mary's, all 4 times in those last 9 games. This is going to be actually, I think, almost a good thing, kind of like we saw what Gonzaga went through the end of conference play last year, where it seemed like Gonzaga had a loaded back half, especially those last couple of weeks where they were facing St. Mary's and USF and BYU, where it almost looked like they were getting prepped for an NCAA tournament in the last few games of the season because everyone was a tournament team. Not to say that every one of these teams is going to be a tournament team this year in the WCC, because the WCC does appear to be overall a little weaker, or at least on the experience front. And I think that's like, if say like people are going to say it looks weaker, is because we don't have the established guys like we had a year ago that are coming back. So again, looking at that back half, seeing a game at BYU, at Portland, at San Diego. San Diego has oddly been a weirdly tough place for St. Mary's to play. I do not, over the course of history, I do not understand why that's been the case. And this is regardless of that they've been good, bad, whatever. And then you have the game also up in Spokane, which will be the senior night up there in Gonzaga. So again, there's a lot of tough challenges in the back half of the schedule for St. Mary's. They'll be able, I think, to get pretty fat on the first half of conference play, and then you're going to hit all those tough road games in the latter half. And then taking a look at the rest, I think the other two that kind of stick out to me and are going to be, probably USF has a stretch where they get San Diego, they're at San Diego, at St. Mary's, Santa Clara, and then Gonzaga. It's a tough 4-game stretch in a 2-week period. But then the other one, and I think this is the interesting one, as BYU is playing its final WCC season. Its last 5 games in conference play are going to be at Pepperdine, where they lost last year. Or did they lose that game? I'm actually now blanking on whether they lost that game. That was one of the ones where I know they nearly lost. They did lose that one. They nearly lost to LMU. They have, again, they're at Pepperdine, then they're at Gonzaga, home for Santa Clara, then they go out to Moraga for St. Mary's, and then they have a week to prep for USF back at the Marriott Center. It is the final wave of, here's all of the best teams in the conference right at the end of their final WCC regular season. Every team that it seems to have given BYU nightmares they will see at the end of conference play. Pepperdine, Gonzaga, St. Mary's, Santa Clara, USF. All these teams have had relative success against BYU since they had joined the WCC back in 2011, and as they leave, each one of them is going to have an opportunity to get them one more time. And USF, it's going to be interesting because USF has also had some fairly good success, and not even just like against BYU in general. They have had some pretty good success against BYU in Provo. And so that'll be a really interesting game because I also think there's going to be some standings ramifications, I think, for that game on that last weekend. USF and BYU, I think, are going to be in the mix somewhere in the 3 to 5 range. So I think there's going to be some jockeying for position, even in that last week of the season, in the last night of the season. And in general, like I'm like, there's always stretches for every team that you kind of look at and point out or whatever. But another one we might find out is San Diego right at the beginning, because I think we'll find out very quickly whether or not San Diego is for real or not, because they get St. Mary's, USF, and BYU all in their first 5 games. And they get both St. Mary's and USF weekend 1. If the San Diego team is going to meet some of the hype that it might be seeing, it's going to have to do something in those first 5 games. It's going to have to, even if it doesn't necessarily win any of those 3 games, the BYU, USF, St. Mary's, they have to be impressive enough or like make it interesting enough to say, oh, there's something to build off of here. There's somewhere to go as they move deeper into conference play. All right. And as we get closer to the regular season and everything else, we'll start to talk a little bit more about the schedules and how they actually are starting to look. And maybe because as far as we know, some of these schedules may actually look a little the difficulties of these schedules might look a little different once we get to mid-December and start to look at these teams of, is Pepperdine starting to play to some of the potential we all think it has? Is San Diego playing to that potential? Is Santa Clara better than we thought they might be? Is USF playing to the level that we think they are? Is BYU better? Because I think there's also a lot of concern over, I think, what BYU's roster is, how it's constructed right now. Because I am totally on one of those people who I'm concerned about BYU going into this season. Their last year in the WCC, they finished 5th last year, and I don't know if they're that much better than they were a year ago. But we'll see about all of that. And before we wrap up, I do want to leave with 2 other pieces of news. One will be good, one is bad. So I mentioned it a couple of different times early in the podcast that Chet Holmgren, the former Gonzaga center, number 2 overall pick, did get injured in the Seattle program, the CrawsOver, over the weekend, and it did come out this morning that he was going to be out for he's going to be out for his first season in Oklahoma City. So I wish all the best in recovery for Chet Holmgren. It just looked like a freak accident for someone who has never been injured in his career. So here's hoping that the injury bug does not bite him throughout the course of his career, and that he is able to get back healthy and get out there. And then on a good note, it also came out this morning that Tommy Kuhse finally got he's going to get his shot in the NBA. He was signed by the San Antonio Spurs to join their training camp and be there for this coming season. So congratulations to Tommy. Again, like, this is a guy who I think that many underestimated, myself included. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But what we saw toward the back half of conference play in the NCAA tournament, what he was able to do in the summer league, averaging 17 a game, I think really showed that, like, this is a guy who's going to be able to compete in the league. So all the best. Congratulations to Tommy for getting that contract.